Congratulations. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is truly a pleasure to have you here this morning. We recognize that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you taking the time this morning to share a little bit of it with us. And I promise you that we'll be brief and to the point. Really, what I want to do today is, and Joe pointed out, we've been having these conversations throughout our service territory. And we believe that it's imperative that Appalachian Power Company become a company that is far more transparent with its customers, that we talk to you about the issues that are going on, both the pleasant ones and the unpleasant ones, particularly as it relates to rate increases. To talk to you about what our plans are and where we're headed and what we see the future to be. And so what I want to do today is really have a brief conversation and really allow you to ask questions. And through this brief conversation, I think you will get a sense of the challenges of a coal-based utility, because that's what Appalachian Power Company is. It is a coal-based utility, and it is also part of its parent company, American Electric Power, is a coal-based utility. And there are unique challenges that we face and you face as our customers given our generation mix. So in having that discussion, I think not only will you see what we're facing and some of the underlying drivers of our current business circumstance, but also where we're headed in the future. And what I commit to you is this isn't not intended to be a one-time opportunity, or some people refer to them dog and pony shows, to just get up and spout out the company's views. And that's why I want to be very limited in that and really take the opportunity to answer your questions, is that we're committed to getting out on a regular basis. From this conversation, you'll see that there's some planning and some things that we're going to have to decide about our generation mix going forward and about what kind of company we're going to be. And that dialogue, our intention is to have a great deal of it in the public, to make it part of public discourse. So as we look to, we're in the process right now, for example, putting together a 10-year plan around our generation fleet. And when we have a general sense of what that looks like, we will be reaching out to stakeholders, various stakeholders, and sharing that with them to get their ideas and their thoughts. And my sense of how I believe we should reach out, it shouldn't be limited to just the other utilities. It shouldn't just be limited to business community. It should include consumer organizations. It should include the environmental organizations. And I think that's very important in being a transparent company. And we may not agree, and we can disagree in a agreeable manner, and we can still share ideas that hopefully will make the overall product and outcome the best that it can possibly be. And I do pledge that to you as president of this company, that that's what we're going to do. We're committed to it. And if you don't see us doing that, hold us accountable to it. Now, I got to tell you that when I was growing up, there was a guy who had a huge influence on my life in the church I grew up in. And what he always said was, he said, Charles, don't always worry about what your end goal is or what the destination that you're seeking to reach. So sometimes you just really need to enjoy the journey and value the journey itself, because in that journey of reaching, going for those destinations and those goals, that there are so many things that you learn that are going to be invaluable to you, that are going to make you a better person, and it will prepare you as you get closer to that destination. It all kind of builds to define you as a person. And he's absolutely right. As with each passing year, I recognize that to be the truth. And it can be, and he said it could be the simplest things, and he was right. Now, I'll give you an example. When I first started out, I started out in Houston, Texas with what was then Houston Lighting and Power. And there was a place called Softball Country Club. And Softball Country Club was one of these places where you pay $600 at the time, and they would give you about 14 games. It was one of these softball multiplexes. And what they did was they hired umpires, and they would pay the umpires $15 a game. So back in 1986, when I was just starting out and was newly married, $15 a game was pretty good. And it was, you could do 4 games a night, and I'd do a couple of nights a week, and that was a nice little bit of supplemental income that I enjoyed. But Softball Country Club was one of these places where people, they spent their money, and there were a lot of guys there who were trying to relive their glory days. And there was far more testosterone around that place than really needed to be. And particularly playing softball. Well, I was an umpire, and I got to tell you, it got grueling sometime. In fact, when I would go home and my wife would call me by my name, I typically wouldn't answer because I was unaccustomed to answering without the preface, "You suck." And again, I think back to my youth counselor, and little did I know that was preparing me to be president and chief operating officer. Well, before I even get to the facts, I asked the folks to just write me down a couple of data points that I'm not very good at remembering. So just a couple of quick facts about the company. We pay approximately $43 million in taxes in the state. We have 1,000 employees in the state of Virginia. We spend about $37 million for material and goods with Virginia businesses. And last year we donated more than $1.6 million in charitable contributions to the community. And I tell you that just to let you know that we are a part of the Southern Virginia community. And I think most of you know the company and have known it for decades, and it has always been committed to Roanoke and to the communities that we serve. And sometimes you just have to remind people that we're part of this community. We're one of you. And the overall success of this community in Southern Virginia is critically important to our success. And I just want you to know that. Where we are right now as a coal-based utility, it's an interesting time in that when you look at our rate increases over the last number of years, and they have been significant, and they have been repeated, they've been reoccurring. And I'd like to say that they're over, but they aren't. We have a rate filing that's out there right now, also with the commission. But just to give you a sense, Appalachian Power Company is 82% of its fleet is coal-based. And when we look at the energy, the actual energy that we deliver to you as a customer, about 95% plus of it is generated from coal. Whether it's our plants or whether it's from the AEP fleet where we purchase power, about 95% of it's coal. Now, let's look at what's happened with coal on 2 dimensions, and it will do a lot to just tell you where we are. First of all, and before I say that, I'd also like to say that Appalachian Power Company was consistently for decades, one of the cheapest electric utilities in the country. year in and year out. The only places where you were going to find electricity cheaper than what we deliver to our customers in this region is going to be the Great Northwest, where you had hydropower and you had a lot of utilities buying from Bonneville. But outside of that, you weren't going to find utilities cheaper than Appalachian power. And something changed. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about is what changed. So what changed? A coal-based utility that allowed us to have a price advantage compared to our neighbors and to the rest of the nation that was tremendous. Coal. First of all, at the mine, the cost of permitting coal has caused the price of coal to go up. The fact that much of the easily mineable coal has been mined and the cost of mining has caused coal to go up. And then as we enter into the global marketplace where coal also has a market in India and China, and many of these coal trains that you see going through aren't necessarily going to U.S. coal plants anymore. They're going to ports for that coal to be shipped overseas. And so you have global pressure on the price of coal also. So just to give you a couple of facts on coal. In 2001, the cost of coal was in the low 40s, around $43 to $45 a ton. And by 2006, it was up to $100 a ton. In 2008, it spiked to $180 a ton. And it came back down to $120 a ton in 2010, and now it's around $90 a ton. That's where coal is. So we've seen coal prices increase dramatically. And as a coal-based utility, we burn close to 15 million tons of coal a year. And we've seen that precipitous increase. So on the one hand, being a coal-based utility, we have this increase in coal costs, again, driven by environmental and safety compliance, which is very appropriate at the mine, by the cost of mining coal going up, and also the fact that we're in a global economy as it relates to coal, and so we're competing with other countries for that coal. So coal prices have gone up. Now let's go to our side of it, of burning the coal. Over the last 5 years, we spent over $2 billion, with a B, dollars on environmental compliance. Over $2 billion on just two power plants. The Mountaineer plant, which is in New Haven in West Virginia, and Amos, which is just outside of Charleston. We spent over $2 billion in environmental compliance. Those plants cost about $600 million to build originally. So we have spent a multiple of their original costs on environmental compliance. I'd like to tell you that that's the end of it and it's over. But currently, right now, there are two sets of rules that are pinned. There are actually 4 rules: coal ash, cooling tower, HAPs, which is hazardous air pollutants, which deals with mercury and acidic gases, and then CATER, which is the Clean Air Transport Rule, which deals with additional restrictions on SO2 and NOx. 2 of those, the coal ash and the water, it looks like those are going to be pushed off and aren't going to be cause us any immediate challenges. But the CATER, the Clean Air Transport Rule, and the HAPs, if they move forward at their current schedule, our mid-sized coal plants, we're going to have to shut them down on January 1, 2015. And that's 2,040 megawatts of coal. 2 of those plants are Virginia plants. They're older plants, they're mid-sized plants, they're subcritical plants, and we're either going to have to scrub them, put environmental compliance on them, or we're going to have to shut them down. The reality is when you're 99% coal on an energy basis, and we love coal, we're committed to coal, we think there are technologies that will allow us to burn coal cheaper. Those technologies are still being tested. We're still, not only us, but various engineering firms and even the coal industry are exploring those, and I believe they'll be there. And it's important that we do get there, because we've been called the Saudi Arabia coal. We have plenty of it. And as we compete globally, it's imperative that we take advantage of that precious resource that we have. But I agree, we do have to figure out a better way to use it and a cleaner way to burn it. And I do believe that those technologies can be available. That being said, these power plants that we're looking at possibly having to shut down, you either have to shut them down or you're going to have to put scrubbers on them. It's going to cost you $500, $600 million to scrub these units. These units are over 50 years old. It doesn't make sense to spend $600 or $700 million on a unit that's well over 50 years old. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at gas. And the reason we're going to be looking at natural gas is that this shale, the Marcellus Shale, the Haynesville Shale, the Eagle Ford Shale, and all these various shale plays throughout the country, our fuel forecasters tell us that there is proven, over 30 years of proven reserves of natural gas that can be delivered at a relatively cheap price. So what our future is we're going to be looking at natural gas. We have to. We aren't going to abandon coal. We've scrubbed those large units. Those units, even looking at the new rules that are coming down the pike, it appears that we aren't going to have to spend much more on them. From what we're looking at right now, we believe they're completely compliant with the new rules that are coming out. But again, for our older units, we're going to have to do something different. As we do something different, I pointed out at the outset that we're trying to put together a 10-year plan right now. Some of that may be purchase power. Some of that may be trying to get additional generation stations from AEP from the larger company, where we may be able to transfer some units. If we could transfer some units that fit into Appalachian Power Company's portfolio and make sense for our customers, we'd look to do that if we could, and we would transfer those at book value as opposed to market value, which would benefit our customers. Those are the types of things that we're going to have to be looking at going forward. There's a phrase that utilities for decades shunned, and that was this idea of least cost. I just think we're at a point right now we're going to have to pursue least cost strategies. The scope of the increases that we've had, they're significant. And I want you to understand something. We don't sit by and be oblivious to the fact that 50 and 60% rate increases aren't difficult. I get it. We recognize that there are people out there in this economy at this time who that becomes an insurmountable hurdle for them. Recognize that. What the challenge is how do you address those issues? You can't address those issues by simply making Appalachian Power Company the villain here. What we have to do is we have to understand what the underlying challenges that we face as it relates to energy. We have to understand the underlying challenges we face as a society for those who can't legitimately afford it. Because there are many, and I mean particularly elderly people who are on fixed incomes, who have worked, contributed to society in a very meaningful way, and their Social Security and their pensions aren't keeping pace. That is a reality. And we got to figure out, what do we do there? But the answer to cannot be solved simply by Appalachian Power Company. It is something that we're going to have to collectively figure out how we solve. Along those lines, it's important to note that when we look at our company's profits, which some people think, the heartless utility just taking this all to the bottom line, Appalachian Power Company is currently at about a 5% return. We're authorized by the commission here in Virginia for 10.5% return. We are financially the worst performing company in the AEP system. In Virginia, they use a benchmark. They use a benchmark for measuring our company against others and setting our return. And they compare us to 11 other utilities in the Southeast. We are the worst performing company financially in the Southeast. And that's with O&M constraints, that's with reducing our workforce, that's with our budgets over the last 6 years, despite the increases in diesel and gasoline, despite the increases in healthcare costs, which many of you face in your businesses. Our budgets have increased annually at a rate of 1% a year with all those costs. So we're also trying to take care of our side of the equation too. And I think we should be held accountable for that. So as we go forward, it's just really important to us that we get out there and we have that dialogue with our customers, that we be very transparent, and that we put ourselves out on the front line to answer your questions and to be held accountable. Now, to the extent that, you never see that Appalachian Power Company is mismanaging its funds, it's not being a good steward of its resources. What we see is that people can't afford to pay, and I respect that. But the reality is these are costs, these are real, legitimate costs that we're going to have to figure out how to address. And in our country, we have been blessed as a country with cheap energy resources for as long as any of us can remember. And unfortunately, people, that's changing. As we enter into a global economy, the cost of energy is going to go up. Any of you who've traveled to Europe know that you're looking at 18 cents a kilowatt hour. And oftentimes people say, well, why don't you do more windmills? Why don't you do more solar? Why don't you do more this? Why don't you do more that? Making that transition from power that has historically been, in the case of Appalachian, 5 cents, 6 cents, now 9 cents a kilowatt hour, and to think of it being 18 cents, I can tell you that's not a transition that I'm willing to lead. So it's a challenging time. I feel very fortunate and very blessed to have the opportunity to work with the people that I do. And I want to, one thing, no matter how frustrating, and I know this gets frustrating, no matter how frustrated you get with the cost of electricity, I ask you one thing: never, ever take it out on the men and women who work at Appalachian Power Company. They love what they do. They're committed to it. They take great pleasure in it. They go out at all times of night, through all types of weather. And I got to tell you, they are thrilled to do it. And not only the folks on the front lines, but the people who support them in our engineering organizations and the people over here in our building, they're all first class. And I've worked many places before, and I'll tell you, they're committed to the communities that they serve. So when you get frustrated, please don't take it out on them. It's okay to take it out on me because I had the umpire training. But if you just would do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. And so with that, again, I appreciate you being here. I, again, value your time. and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. And my general philosophy is there's nothing that you can ask me that I particularly take offense to anything. I think you deserve an answer. And if I can't answer it, I have other people here to help me answer it. And if we can't, we promise we'll get back to you with something. Yes, sir.
Charles, one area that you didn't touch on with your brief review there is just the demand for power.
Oh, yeah.
What's that looking like in Virginia and in the industry?
Well, right now, the demand is actually down. With the economic downturn that we've experienced, I think there have been a number of projects around the country, particularly on the East Coast, that you've seen canceled. I think Dominion, which was looking at building a nuclear plant, they decided to put that on the back burner. Probably Japan helped a little bit there too. But there are a number of projects throughout the East that are being canceled or being postponed. One project that we were involved with that was very controversial was the PATH line, the transmission line that was going to stretch from Virginia up through Maryland, I believe. Maryland up to Pennsylvania, that's where it was going to be. That line was very controversial. A lot of folks didn't want to see it built. And ultimately, the PJM, which is the regional transmission organization which plans transmission for the eastern grid, said we didn't need the line. And we primarily didn't need it because the economic situation in the East is such that right now things are a little slow. Now, on a personal level, in individual homes, there's kind of two phenomenons. One, our homes are far more electrified. When we went from the big televisions to the flat screen, you also increased significantly in your energy consumption. Those flat screen televisions consume a lot more than the old tube televisions. The other issue is we have far more, we have more than one computer in the house, back when we didn't have any. We have cell phones, we have iPods and iPads, and many of those appliances we keep plugged up. When you were a kid, your mom used to tell you, hey, turn off the faucet, quit letting it drip. Well, when you keep those appliances plugged in, even when you aren't charging, it's like your faucet dripping. You should unplug them when you aren't using them. It's like your faucet dripping. So at the personal level, there are more electrical appliances, but we're also seeing that there is we think price is beginning to influence behavior, and we are beginning to see residential consumption decrease a little. And again, we were so cheap, we just did not get into a mindset of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, as long as I can remember, has been a fad. We had it in the 70s during that energy crisis. We had it in the late 80s during that energy crisis. And it's something that we're going to have to ingrain as part of our overall strategy going forward. I hope that answered. Yes, sir.
Charles, you talked about, we know demand's going down, but what is APCO doing, or AEP, the system doing about energy efficiency and conservation? Because, I mean, the demand it's going to continue as we have more and more people. What are you going to do about trying to keep us from using so much of energy?
Well, one thing there is that is largely one of those personal responsibility issues. And what we have done and what we continue to do is through mailers, through some of our ad campaigns, we try to promote the idea of energy efficiency. The other thing that we are looking at doing, and we're going to go and talk to commission staff about, we have it in West Virginia, is we have an energy efficiency program. We have $6 million set aside for energy efficiency. And what we do with that is there are various programs within the energy efficiency program. Some targets residential, low income, some target small businesses, and some even the larger businesses. On the business side, particularly small businesses, it's usually around lighting, as it is Residential is lighting and weatherization. And when you look at your larger customers, it's typically motors. There are more efficient motors that they can have in their processes. And what we have there, that $6 million gives you credits, and it also provides some matching funds for some improvements. We have to file that in Virginia, but we're going to talk to staff first because, again, it's another $6 million that ultimately goes into rates. But we do believe it's a path that we need to start pursuing more aggressively. Oh, I'm sorry, he's first. Yeah.
All right. Well, as a business person, I know you can't live on a 5 ROE. You got to change that. I mean, as president of the company. This is a coal, this town relies a lot more on coal than we realize economically. I'm interested in the economics of if you could permit and start a new coal-fired plant versus the natural gas plants that you're looking at right now. Just big picture, what's the economic difference in siting and permitting and running coal versus gas right now?
Well, I can tell you siting and permitting a coal plant right now is far more difficult. We have a coal unit in southwest Arkansas, the Turk unit, and it will be the last unit, I can assure you, the AP will build for a while. That unit was approved by the commission, and it was appealed by a group of well-heeled duck hunters who are next door, and also the Audubon Society. I believe that's correct. And appealed to the Supreme Court, and we've been tied up in litigation for about 1.5 years now. We've spent, the plant is $2.2 to $2.4 billion plant. We've spent right at $2 billion on it, and we don't know if it's going to be a merchant plant or it's going to be a regulated plant. We're going to finish it, but it's not the kind of risk and exposure that we can face going forward. It's far more difficult because of environmental requirements to site a coal plant right now. Typically, the advantage to coal, of course, the construction cost of a coal plant is far greater, but it's always been the fuel. And as the availability of natural gas, if it's anything like it's being forecasted, it is going to be very difficult to build coal right now because the fuel costs of natural gas and the advantage in the construction costs make it the choice. And you'll hear the coal industry say that there is this mad dash to gas by everybody. And what the coal industry would argue, and I would say it is something that we have to keep in mind, is that the last time we did this, gas prices spiked, and gas went over $10 a MCF, and that's when we really had an advantage over everyone. And, you know, again, what the geologists, what everybody in the business says is that this shale is real, it's abundant, and it's cheap. What the unknown is this fracking issue. We don't, you know, that's an unknown. But, you know, our challenge is we have to decide what is the cheapest thing to move forward for our customers based on the information we have today. And today, that's natural gas. But I don't think the coal industry, again, there is a global market for coal. The amount of coal that's being shipped overseas, I don't think the level of dependence on just U.S. utilities burning coal is what it once was as it relates to the financial health of the coal industry. I'm sure they'd like to keep as much market as possible, but I think there is a global market that's going to prop up the coal industry. And we're still there. Remember, you know, like I said, two of our largest baseload units, the one we spent the $2 billion on, we're going to keep burning coal there. And the rest of the AEP fleet has large baseload coal units that have been scrubbed, and they're going to keep burning coal too.
You said that this is the lowest performing unit in your system for a long period of time. What do you attribute that to?
Actually, not a long period of time. We were actually pretty close to our ROE if you go back to the mid around 2004, 2005. What I attribute it to is we spent, well, without going through those specifics again, our costs have gone up at a level that have not been keeping pace with our revenues. Our recovery has not kept pace with our costs. And the cost, and when I talk about coal, I want to be clear too, that's not just our fleet. When we talk about coal, AEP, we buy, APCO, Appalachian Power Company, is we don't have enough generation to serve all our customers. So we buy from AEP, we buy coal-fired generation from AEP too. And so as AEP's, just as our costs have gone up, so has AEP, so even our purchase power costs have gone up too. And one thing I did fail to say was that even with our rate increases, the national average is just over 11 cents kilowatt hour. We're just over 9 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm sorry, here with the rate increase, we'll be just over 10 cents a kilowatt hour with the current rate increase that we have. So we're about 2 cents below the national average. And we continue to compare very favorably to the utilities around us. When you look at where we're going to be at the end of the year and you look at where Dominion's going to be at the end of the year, on 1,000 kilowatt hours, which is what you measure, we're going to be several dollars cheaper than they are if you assume we all get what we ask for.
But of course, we were much, much lower than them for a long time.
For a long time.
But
$2 billion.
My understanding that for a long time, there was an agreement that you didn't have to build facilities in Virginia that were serving Virginia. And that's one of the reasons that we don't have facilities here that meet all of our needs. But also, as decisions have been made about what units were assigned to Appalachian, it would appear that some of the greater expenses have come to Appalachian than to some of the other aspects of AEP. And so wondering if there aren't some ways that you can make some changes that would be in the benefit and spread some of those costs across the system.
I agree with you 100%. And when I talk about the 10-year plan, those are kind of things we want to look at. And there are two parts of your question. I want to answer them both. First of all, it makes absolutely no difference where a generation plant's located. It makes a difference as it relates, I believe, to economic development and jobs, which we get. And I can tell you the next generator that I build, I want to build that in Virginia. The next generating plant that I build, I do want to build in Virginia. But it doesn't matter where it is, because the way the electric system works is if you would imagine a huge wash tub and someone put a bunch of holes in the bottom of it, then put a bunch of hose pipes around it with people standing around at the spigot and there being a fill line like your McDonald's cup, what you have to do is you have to keep you would have to keep the water at that fill line. And when somebody puts another hole in the bottom of that bucket, you'd have to turn up a little water. And if you were to put a cup on any one of those holes, you don't know which hose the water came out of. And that's really the way electricity is. But what you want to do is you want to buy the cheapest energy that's available to you. And that's why when I say that we're 84% coal and we deliver coal to you at a 95+% rate, it's because some of our more inefficient plants, and we have some gas, and they aren't very efficient, the peaker units. We don't run them when we can buy cheap coal. And so it doesn't really matter where the plant is, it's just what the cost is for electricity. Now, The other issue is I pointed out that we buy from AEP. AEP had what they call a pool. And the way the pool worked was all of the Eastern companies, we relied on each other for generations. And it was an incredibly great deal. And everybody loved it, and it was wonderful, and electricity was cheap, particularly in Appalachian Power, but it was cheap throughout the rest of the AEP fleet. But again, AEP is a coal-based utility, just as APCO is. And as their prices went up, so did our costs as it related to buying from the pool. Now, what we need to do is we're looking at the pool. The pool worked well for decades, and make no mistake about it, the price from the pool is still, if you look at energy and capacity and you start getting into regulatory, it's still okay. It's not as good as it used to be. In December, we voted to terminate the pool. And what terminating the pool means is that we need to take a fresh look at it. And there are things that I believe that we can do. For example, in the AEP pool on capacity, and I hate to go down this path, but there are just structural things that we can do as it relates to the pool that we can get some low-cost capacity. We have to explore those. And with this, and we visit with staff, we visit with commissions in every state in the East that we do business, all who are part of the pool. And what we've pledged is we're going to lay it out there in the fall, and we're going to try to see whether it needs to be done away with. Does it need to be revised? I don't think it can go forward the way it exists today. And I have some very clear ideas about what we should be doing for APCO as it relates to the pool. So we are. Did that answer your question?
Let me compliment your folks. We're a very small customer at the Virginia Museum of Transportation. But before Terry Hall retired, he was on our board. You all sent some people down and helped us evaluate where we were. We've spent a little bit of money and totally replaced most everything in the Virginia Museum of Transportation with CFLs. We're getting twice the lumens at half of the cost. And so I think it's important for us to say thank you to you all, because we'd have never been able to, at our stage of trying to make sure we pay the bills, even understood that that was an option. We will get our payback in 4 years. I hope other people here will take advantage of that same opportunity that you all made available, because that has really helped us a lot.
That's great. And that's why we'd like to get an energy efficiency program that we could look more expansively in encouraging that kind of behavior. And one of the challenges that we face in our service territory in particular, and I'll start with saying back prior to legislative session, we were talking about energy issues. We have been kind of the poster child of rate increases. And so we went out and we started talking to folks in the legislature to share with them some of what we were sharing with you. And I was meeting with a legislator from Northern Virginia, and his reaction was, well, wait a minute, your costs are lower than mine. But our challenge is, than his constituents face, but what our challenge is, particularly in Southern Virginia, is that, first of all, we have a housing stock that is challenging. We have a lot of people in Southern Virginia, which is the most economically challenged part of the state, that have inadequate housing. They have very poor insulation. They have modular homes that are ill-equipped with the best technology as it relates to efficiency. Some of them, many people don't have the money or the resources to make sure their equipment even works properly. So you go out and you do an energy audit on someone, and their heat pump is running, it's just not working. And what happens is they hear it buzzing, they keep cranking up the heat. The backup heat, which is the resistance heating, which is the most expensive heating there is, comes on. We go to trailers where the skirt's gone off the bottom. Cold air is blowing up under the bottoms of the trailers. You look through and you can see out, and not just trailers, but also, again, many of the older homes in an economically challenged part of the state. And that is one of the big crosses that we have to bear, is that we have, unlike Dominion, we have a disproportionate number of customers who face that economic challenge. And again, as it relates, be it energy efficiency policy or what it is that we're going to do, we aren't going to get to solving that by just saying the bad old utility keeps raising rates, because our rates are a reflection of real, legitimate costs. And think about it. If you think about the debate that we've had, I don't think you'll find many instances to where folks don't say that the cost, the actual underlying costs, are going up. But that being said, make no mistake about it, we should be held accountable, and we should make sure that we're being the best stewards of our resources that we possibly can be.
What has to happen with solar and wind before you all will consider that more seriously as an option for you?
We have 300 megawatts of wind now. Some of that wind actually did not get approved by the commission here in Virginia. So we figured, we found a way to sell it. We found a market to some companies that are very concerned about their carbon footprint. The reason that that wind wasn't approved was the cost of it, or when your rates are going up as much as ours have gone up. Wind, make no mistake about it, renewables are expensive. They cost a lot more than fossil-based generation. And I do think there's a role for them. I think they're a part of the solution, but they are not, make no mistake about it, they have to be backed up. They don't run all the time, and they're very expensive. I do believe that the cost is going to come down. It continues to come down. And I think the electric utility industry, we know it, will change dramatically. I believe that solar panels on your roof, or processed in your roof shingles, all of those things are really feasible and possible. They just aren't scalable yet. I think distributed generation, I think many of you remember the Bloom box. That was a big deal on 60 Minutes a couple of years ago, which was a fuel cell that sits outside your house. I think all of those things are plausible for residential and small commercial uses. They just aren't scalable yet. Oh, yeah.
I was pleased to hear you say that you all are looking towards that future and trying to get ahead of things. I mean, I think one of the things that happened to us was that we were complacent with our low rates for a long time, and then when conditions changed, we didn't get out in front of it quite as fast. And granted, we've got a lot of pressures right now, but what other things are you all doing towards looking to the future to trying to be in a good position to comparatively keep rates low?
That will, the 10-year plan that I was talking about earlier, what we want to do is, first of all, Appalachian Power Company, again, we don't have enough capacity to serve our customers. We got to get there, and we got to figure out how to get there on a least cost basis.
Is that least cost now or least cost in a longer, how do you define that?
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges. I think that it's a combination, but I really do believe for us right now, the emphasis is now. So, for example, if I had an opportunity to pick up another coal unit at book value from AEP, I'd probably take it, even though I want to diversify more. And the reason I want to take it is if I can get a base load coal plant at book value from the company, I'm going to get an asset that will be around for another 25 to 30 years. and one that will deliver me both capacity and energy at the lowest possible cost. And right now, again, when I look in our footprint, I've got to get to the lowest possible cost. Now, I do want to diversify and raise our gas portfolio some. I want to do more energy efficiency. We have a demand response tariff in Virginia, which is something that we created here over the last year. And what demand response is you take, and it usually only works for large industrial customers, is that you, if there's a hot day, and demand's really high and generation's getting short, they can interrupt you. You get paid to get interrupted. But the good news is that's capacity that we don't have to build. And so we're all a winner. The company lowers its overall energy cost, and that's generation that we don't have to build and our customers don't have to pay for. I think all of those things are part of the solution. It's just getting the right mix of them, and it's just dynamic. Yes, sir.
One last question, and this is on a totally different topic. Of course, you have to deal with it. It's not about fuel or coal or gas or anything, but we read every day in the paper or on the Today Show or whatever, you see all these catastrophes that are happening. You know, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, et cetera, et cetera. Is that, I don't know if that's in your history of running these companies, are we experiencing more than ever before, or is that just a factor that every year we have 5% of our expenses that we just know are going to go in that area? And obviously that's an expense when that happens. You have to, you can't plan for a tornado or a hurricane. How do you deal with that? And is that just is it, getting back to the earlier part of my question, are we just experiencing more of the same, or is it more than before?
As far as it being more than before, I have to rely on what I hear on the news too. When, for example, I believe this was the worst tornado season since '53. I rely on that kind of data. I can tell you that for us over the last couple of years, one, the winter storm that I think everybody around this part of the country remembers, that had a huge impact. You cannot plan for that. That's one of those, 50-year storms. And the way rates are designed is you match your revenues to your costs. That's what regulators are supposed to do. And you factor in a certain amount of weather variation, should be baked in there. When you have an aberration like that, typically commissions will allow you to recover it over a longer period of time, so the ratepayers don't see an immediate impact. So for this winter storm, we're deferring it, recovery of it over a number of years. Now, this year we've had an incredible, and I would imagine that you've noticed it too, the spring storms, these afternoon storms. We've had outage after outage after outage. Now those are not the big major catastrophic storms. Those are ones that unfortunately we have to figure out how to deal with our own budget. And our vice president of distribution was telling me we have something called the SRP, which is the Service Restoration Plan. And you invoke that when you have a certain number of outages. We have invoked it already this year 10 times, and typically we only invoke it 12 times over the year. So we've already had 10 of those SRP, and I'm not even sure if last week wasn't one. This was the conversation I had with him 2 weeks ago. So we may be at 11 already, because we had 30,000 people out just last week with a storm that came through. So those are costs that we have to absorb and just figure out how to work with. Big storms, you get relief. The other storms, that's part of doing business.
Sure does.
All righty. Well, look, again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your being here. We recognize that your time is valuable, and again, this is not intended to be a one-time thing. It is, we're ready and willing to come and talk to anybody at any time, and we'll make ourselves available. And if there's some venue that you have in mind that you think this information is useful or having dialogue, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to do that too. But again, thank you for your time, and I got to tell you, this is a beautiful city. I lived in Northern Virginia for a number of years, and in fact, my son was born in Northern Virginia, so he's a Virginian by birth. And it is a gorgeous state and great people, and we want to be a partner and are committed to doing that just as we have been for a century now. So again, thank you and have a good day.